Hey, in case I forget at the end of this video as well, I don't want to ever forget this again. Like, I could go back and just add it on to the end, but at the end of my videos, I have sign-off lines that I usually do just to get my point across. And my friend pointed out to me that to qualify for a view, it has to go to the end. I don't know about this. I have no idea. I look at my view counts, and it's exciting to watch it go off or whatever, but so yeah, the sign-off line for every video is two things, and I've got a third one I'm working on. Maybe we'll just toss them around and, you know, one this night or whatever. Go make somebody smile tomorrow, or do your best to make somebody smile tomorrow. I've been trying to preach this, I guess, for a while now, because when you can make somebody smile, you can almost make their day, especially if they're having a bad day, but any day, like. So that's why I say that. Like, I think the more people try to make each other smile, the happier this world will spin. And the other second thing I usually say is, let's make this world spin a little happier together. And I mean that. I mean that. Like, I'm starting to notice more and more of the good in the world. And obviously it's not because of me. I mean, it's just like, I think I'm becoming more aware of it. And I think when you become more aware of it, it intensifies, and people who feel the same way are working together to accomplish that same goal. And I know it's not like a political goal or a religious goal, it's just a human goal to make more people smile every day. And I think, technically, I've been doing that for a while. It's so easy to do when you get used to it, I think. Easiest way is just make stupid faces to babies for a while, and then start making stupid faces to normal people. I think there's a child in all of us that likes that. I know I like it. I know when people make stupid faces, I go, oh my god, that guy just made a stupid face. That's awesome. Good for him. Anywho, those are my two sign-off lines. And so, you know, if you're liking these videos, subscribe, share them. I know you guys are sharing them. I know a lot of you guys are sharing them, and that's awesome, and you guys rock. And you're the bestest in the whole land. But I gotta get onto the subject, because we're already 2 minutes in, and I guarantee this is going at least 20 minutes, and I think the next one's gonna go a good 20 as well. Because I had to go back. We're gonna talk about my favorite 1 to 5 favorite games on every video game system I've ever owned. We'll talk a little history too. Well, let's start with history. Anywho. There was a first generation of consoles before the Atari 2600 that came out between like 72 and 80, if I'm not mistaken, like right around that time period, about eight years. Let me see. There was the Magnavox Odyssey, the Color TV game, released in 77, only in Japan. Magnavox Odyssey was released in 72, was the first video game console. Telstar was in 76, I was 1. APF TV Fun was 76. I was also only one of that. Anywho, I didn't know about that generation of gaming. Like, I always thought Atari 2600, ColecoVision, Intellivision, Pong, you know. I thought that was first gen. Apparently I was wrong. Did not know that. Lots of games came out anywhere between those dates. And it wasn't until like 76 or to 83. That was when the Atari 2600 and like literally like 8 or 9 other consoles came out within that time period. Fairchild, a lot of these I don't recognize. Magnavox Odyssey 2, Intellivision, Super Cassette Vision, 84, Arcadia, the Atari 5200, ColecoVision. I remember those. But I started thinking about this tonight, and I don't know what made me think to do this, but I had to search for it, because I remember Atari 2600, but I don't remember all the games. I remember Frogger was awesome. I remember Pac-Man, and Ms. Pac-Man was my favorite. Well, not my favorite. This is what we're going to get into, so I guess we're into it. We're going to start with the Atari 2600. There are some consoles I skip in this list that I never owned because I didn't think they were very good consoles. And consoles are always such an expensive thing. Like, that's why I like computers. Like, you build a pretty good computer, you're good for, well, probably about the same amount of time, let's face it. But you can upgrade, whereas console you cannot. And you can do a lot more with a computer. like this. Well, I guess you could do this now with like this gen. Can you hear that? Alright, this is pretty frickin' weird. There's an ice cream truck. You know the sound of an ice cream truck. And the music is Silent Night. I kid you not. That's driving around somewhere near my house. And I live on a dead-end street, so it can only be my street or Langhorne Road. It's kind of creepy. It's creepy music. I never really thought of that. I'm gonna write that down. Ice cream trucks. Yeah, creepy. Anywho. Anywho. Atari 2600. This is the only console that I know with absolute certainty one game was my favorite on that console, and it was Pitfall. The reason being, it was a patient game. You didn't have to rush through it like action, like E.T. or something like Outlaw, or a game that you're constantly having to focus on the screen. You can't just put it down and like eat a chip or something. I don't know. But Pitfall is one of those games where like you came to the next screen. If you don't know what Pitfall is, it's a 3 or 4 color game where it's a guy and he can swing on vines and go up and down ladders and progress from one end of the screen to the next, and boom, the next screen would come up and it would be a new challenge. Most of the time you could just stay right where you were and you'd be safe, and you could look at the screen and see. I love stuff like the strategy and like chess and stuff like that. So I'm watching the screen. So that was cool to me. Like Pac-Man, you were constantly moving. You had to keep away from the ghost or chase the ghost down if you'd just eaten a power pill. I could go for a power pill right now myself. So Pitfall was the defining moment, the very first video game, home console game that I played that I was just like hooked. Like, I mean, Frogger maybe too, Pac-Man maybe, Q*bert, shit. But, once again, all of those games, with the exception of sometimes in Frogger, you're pretty much constantly moving, and I don't like that. I like to be able to just stop, catch my breath, take a sip of a soda, or water, or White Russian, or whatever. Well, I guess not in 1984. Anywho, okay. So, Atari 2600 Pitfall undoubtedly was my favorite game on the system. I liked E.T., Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, Q*bert, Frogger, Space Invaders, obviously. So, you know, the classics, certainly. But then, several years passed, and there came a time when I didn't have a console anymore. Like, I had Atari, but I wasn't really playing it because I was just bored with it at that point. Especially having an arcade at the mall. One-level malls, that's another thing I forgot to mention in the last video. About the good old days. One-level malls. Remember that? You didn't have to have 3 stories that's sinking into a swamp now. Those are cool malls now. But in hindsight, like, I love the Old Taunton Mall. I love going there when I go back. Just to see. Like, there used to be a music store in there and a video game arcade. Video game arcade. And Bradley's and Stop and Shop. And, oh, I got so many stories I'll tell you about, like, the early 80s. Man, there'll come a time. Anywho, let's move up. So, we're moving on in generations now, and now there are 2 systems that come out that are in direct competition. This is the first time, for me at least, that that's ever mattered. Like, the Atari 7800 came out in 84, but in it was 83 the NES came out, and 85 when the Sega Master System came out. I was never into NES at first, so when the Sega Master System came out, that's when I had to decide, because I hadn't played video games in years, and I decided that the gun for the Sega Master System at the time, not anymore, was the coolest looking weapon on earth. Like, I wish it was a real one. Like, I was so excited to own that system. It was slick, it was black and red, and the controllers had a little knob that you could screw in and out. So Nintendo only had the 4-way, well, technically it's an 8-way, but you could actually use a little knob on your Sega Master System controller. And the Sega Master System, when it came out, took cartridges and cards. And the cards I guess they couldn't have held enough information to do bigger games because they stopped making them after a while. But I always thought that was a weird thing to offer. And nonetheless, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go with that one. So I got the Sega Master System. And eventually I got an NES as well, probably a few years later. But I still like the Sega Master System better. Let me give you my NES top 3 favorite games. And you're going to think, wow, what the hell did the Sega Master System do anywhere near as good as that? Well, for NES, there's nothing on the Sega Master System I can compare it to as good. Contra. Contra was the code that, started a generation of geekdom, I think. I'll repeat it here. You probably already know it, but the up, down, left, right, BA start. And I think if you're fast enough, you can get 90 free men. That means you have 3, so it'd be like 270 if I'm not mistaken, guys, to get through the game. And if you didn't do it fast enough, it was 30, but usually 30 was enough anyway. So there was alternating levels. One was a side scroller where you could get 4 or 5 different types of guns, which at the time that was awesome. Like, because you were just used to shooting like maybe 2 if you're lucky, maybe a grenade and like a gun. And so this game comes along and you get all these different burst weapons or automatic weapons or so on and so forth. And it just if you played Contra, you got to the point where there was one weapon that you just wanted above all else, that you just wanted to play with that one, and you knew, except for maybe 1 or 2 levels, that would be the weapon you'd be using the whole game. And then there was the forward-moving levels, which I hated those. I could do them, but I just didn't like them. They weren't as fun. And you flipped when you jumped. That's why I really like Contra. The other 2 games on the NES will surprise you, because there's a lot of good games. But the next one is Excitebike. I love the creator track feature. The feature, that was racist too. The H-ramp was always the coolest one because you could fly off of those. And in the air you could spin and do move forward and backward. And you had to land it right. But that was Excitebike. But there was an early sense of, not equilibrium, physics there. Like, even though everything moved at the same speed, you had like when you approached the bottom of the ramp, you could crouch down, you could feel yourself pushing off at the top of the ramp to get as much air as possible, even though it wasn't happening in the game. You could feel it nonetheless. And my favorite game of all time does that the best out of any game, personally, I think. And I'll get to that later on. I think you already know it, but we're at 13 minutes, and I'm only at Nintendo Entertainment System. Remember when it came with Robbie the Robot, that game where it picked up the stupid discs? That did not last. Nor did it ever come back. I picked up the system just with the gun and the 2 controllers and Mario and Duck Hunt. Now there was... Originally, it only came with Mario. Then it came with Mario and Duck Hunt, and later on, it came with outdoor games, Olympic games. I can't remember, summer games. I can't remember, but it was like that. So you had those 3 games with it. The rarest of all those is just the Mario. So Excitebike. Anywho, and the last, which was the first game that just I had to have. It was that have-to-have game. Like, all these other games were fun to have and play. But Double Dragon. I remember the first day I saw that, it was at Caldor, where Shaw's was, it might still be, on 44, near, I don't remember what it was originally, but it became a, it was where Shaw's used to be. And then it moved over to the new building. And then it became a, bargain thrift store. It's a chain up there. Christ. Newport, Providence. I can't remember. Anywho, Rich Marini worked there for a while. And I remember I was in Caldor and I saw they were just putting it out, and it was tough to find, I think, or this was the release day, and I called my cousin Larry from the payphone, mind you. There was no cell phones back then. And said, "Oh my God, Double Dragon just came out. Do you want it? They have it here." I was like, do you have the money? Can you ask your mom or whatever? Because we were like 12, 10, something like that. And so somehow, yes, he could get the game. So we got the game. And it was the first game that, okay, you were punching, kicking, you could dodge or whatever, I think. But it added the ability to pick up weapons that your enemies would drop. And that was just what did it for me for that game. It was just like... And that also did, I think, eventually come out for the Sega Master System. But that was it. The whip, or I can't remember what else, baseball bat. A nice peaceful game. Anywho, that's what sold the system for me. That's when I knew I had to have it. That was near the end of its generation, because what would come next? Genesis and Super Nintendo. Here's where my foundation started to crumble. When I first got a Sega Master System, you used to be able to call the company and talk to tech support about how to beat a game if you were stuck on something. I kid you not. Like, you'd have to pay, but that's how it worked. And I got to know two people, these sisters, Sandy and Sharon Rayo. I was like 9 or 10. They used to send me for free, just out of the kindness of their heart, all the paperwork they got for games, like Phantasy Star and so on and so forth. Like, they would send that to me. It was like having an inside connection. It was crazy. I used to send them like Christmas cards and say thank you so much, like, because I don't know if they did that for everybody. That's pretty insane. Like, I couldn't imagine keeping up with like the volume of people who probably own the system, but they were phenomenal. Well, you don't get that customer service anymore. I can't call like Sony up right now and be like, hey, could you send me the product guide for, this, and this? Yeah, no, just send it to me. No, I'm not going to pay for it. It wouldn't happen. And you wouldn't talk to anybody that would think that was rational. But in my day, it was. And either that or I was just, lucky. So that, I was committed to Sega for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, 10 years later, they stopped making systems. Anywho, they were still making them now. And the Genesis, in my opinion, was way better than the Super Nintendo. There will be those who argue. And, some of your arguments are valid. But, Sega Genesis. One of the launch titles was Ghouls and Ghosts, which was a knockoff of Ghosts and Goblins from Nintendo. Or, actually, it might have been the original from the arcade. Anywho, there was 3 levels of armor that you could get from chests. Chests. Ooh, discs. Chests. That's even worse. Chests equals bad. And it was a tough game. Like, there were levels that would move, and you had to keep moving and stuff like that. But as soon as I had the 3rd power up for the lance that you could shoot, and the gold armor, I could usually get through a level pretty well. And the bosses were tough in that game. So good, though. Such a great game. After Super Nintendo, if I make it that far, I'm going to cut this because, like I said, we're almost at 20 minutes now. I don't know why I say this all the time. I feel like we're actually talking in it. So if there's... Maybe it helps you understand why I'm cutting it, because I don't want it to go too long. Oh, wait. We gotta take a step back. I haven't talked about the Sega Master System. Yeah, well... Shoot. Let's cut it here. Because this is gonna be a long one. Sega Master System really kind of was the first real system for me. Like, I had Atari 2600. The Sega Master System made video games real to me, and I will explain to you that in just a second. So, in the meantime, go make somebody smile. And together, we will make this world spin happier. I got some shirt ideas. I got some sticker ideas. Should I do them? I don't know. We'll find out in the next episode of The Road to 40. Episode 35. Part 2. Back in a flash.